Welcome, everyone. We're getting ready to show a video that they're going to be loading up, but I want to make sure we get started on this conversation. My name is Craig Kier. I'm from the University of Maryland. I lead the Arts for All initiative, which is a presidential campus-wide initiative that seeks to take the arts and put them in dialogue with many disciplines that often surprise those in the STEM areas, one of which is quantum. We believe that the arts have a crucial space in all of these disciplines because they really challenge us to think differently. They also are an incredible way to translate incredibly complex things, such as the world of quantum. I am not going to speak to you at depth about quantum because we have many other people who will be able to do so. So I'd just like to quickly have each of the panelists introduce themselves, and then we'll get right down to some questions. Starting with Nicole, a quick introduction, please.
Hi, I'm Nicole Halpern. I'm a theoretical quantum physicist and a quantum information scientist at the Joint Center for Quantum Information and Computer Science, where also Carl is based. I lead the Quantum Steampunk Initiative. I should probably briefly explain what quantum steampunk is so that anything in the future I say makes some sense. Steampunk is a genre of literature, art, and film that juxtaposes settings from the 1800s, like Sherlock Holmesian London and the American Wild Wild West, with futuristic technologies. Great examples include The Time Machine by H.G. Wells and 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. One of my spheres of research, quantum thermodynamics, I think is the real-world version of steampunk. We take the thermodynamics of the 1800s, engines, the Industrial Revolution, energy processing, efficiency, and ask, say, what does a quantum engine look like and what can it accomplish? So I dubbed this field, or this aesthetic of my field, quantum steampunk. So we have lots of initiatives. You can see a quantum steampunk sculpture in the exhibition hall. I co-teach a quantum steampunk creative writing course at the University of Maryland with creative writing faculty. And I co-organized a quantum steampunk short story contest.
Hi, my name is Margaret Arakawa. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer for IonQ. I think, in general, my job and all of our jobs is very hard in the sense of how do you explain what you do, the impact of it, who it's going to change or help or evolve. And I think anything that helps build the bridge, an analogy, a piece of art, anything that helps people understand that we all should be working in quantum now, and something that kind of hits the left brain and the right brain, something, because most of us, we all work in all the different fields that we work in, and we should all work because we love it. And when you understand it and you deeply believe in it, whatever that helps make that connection is important for our industry.
Hi everyone, my name is Anjali, and I am the founder of the Cubed Initiative, which is a collaboration between the Center for Quantum Networks and the United Nations International Telecommunications Union. Sorry, that's a mouthful. But it's on bridging together quantum science, the arts, and responsible engineering. And I'm also an undergraduate student at the University of Maryland.
Hi, everybody. My name is Adriane Fang, and I am on faculty in the dance program at the University of Maryland. I'm also currently the associate director of the School of Theater, Dance, and Performance Studies, and it's really wonderful to be here. Thank you for coming.
Hi, I'm Carl Miller. I'm a co-director of the Joint Center for Quantum Information and Computer Science, also known as QWC. I am originally a mathematician, and I migrated into quantum 10 or 15 years ago. And my research is primarily on the interaction between cryptography and quantum computing, and finding, the various connections, one influencing the other. And I'm very much lately interested in the overlap with performing arts.
So as we face normal technical difficulties, I want to get started with the question related to what Carl just talked about, and that is, we have a dancer and a quantum physicist working together, and I'd love to understand what the dialogue was like as we began, which was a pretty complicated set of scenarios of bringing artists alongside physicists. That's not a normal thing to have these folks in the same room. So can you talk to us a little bit about that, please?
Yeah, sure. So, I guess we began through the Arts for All initiative, and I think we got connected and wanted to explore the idea of using dance to communicate quantum. And I think you already had some previous experience with in the tech area doing that, and we were honing that into quantum. And I'll say a few things, and then Adriane can, I know we'll have more to add. When we started, we were looking for, I think, translations. So I have two main goals, I think, when it comes to the use of performing arts in quantum. The main one, the practical one, is how do we communicate and how do we educate people with this? And we need the whole range. We're used to using words and visuals, but there's more. There's kinesthetics, there's music, there's all this stuff. And particularly with quantum, because it's challenging, we need to use that whole range. And the other is finding good ways to study the value of research, really looking at all of it together, why we do what we do, why is this direction good, what are the dangers, and that sort of thing. That I think also we need art in order to contemplate. And what do you think?
I think we're trying to get the video up, but the video actually has been playing up on the top level. I don't know if anybody has seen it. Actually, there's like 2 iterations of it, like one that was very informal that we tried to do, and then we have the slick curated version for you today. So hopefully we'll be able to get that up. I think I was going to say that when we began, yes, Craig pretty much match-made my collaborator, Jonathan David Martin, me, and Carl together, and it was a process of figuring out each other's language and figuring out what was important to each one of us in this meeting of minds and bodies, and trying to figure out what the form factor was. Was it an installation? Was it, did it have text in it? Did it have live music? Did it engage the audience? Did it have technology? Who knew? We didn't know at all when we walked in the door of the studios together. And I think I made Carl dance like immediately.
Totally new.
Yeah. It wasn't. He actually has a theater background and a music background, so him coming to play in our playground was not quite as challenging, I think, for us as us coming over to your side of the room and going, what, qubits? Okay, let's see how we can translate this. I think, Craig, you have
So to that end, this is a short preview of what this all looks like in action.
When I tell people what I do, they often ask me, when are the quantum computers going to be here? It's a fair question. But if we want to know when the quantum computers are coming, we first need to define the question. How would we know if we had one? Let's start with some fundamentals. Digital computation is based on what we call bits. A bit is a data element that is always in a definite state, either 0 or 1. Digital computation manipulates sequences of bits. For example, 0, 1, 1, 0, 1. Quantum computation is different. Quantum computation is based on qubits. A qubit is like a bit, except that its state cannot be determined until it is measured, and then it becomes fixed as either a 0 or a 1. When 2 qubits interact, they may become entangled into what we call a Bell state. This constrains their state, and it creates a relationship that exists even when the qubits are separated at a distance. Even when we bring in more pairs of qubits. In the research that I've contributed to, we scramble the qubits up into what is called a Claw state. The entanglement in the Claw state is disguised so that when we measure over and over, no classical computer could be powerful enough to simulate the outcome. This is the hidden state test. And the great thing about this test is it is very tolerant to noise. Noise produces a random outcome. But we can show that as long as the winning frequency is just slightly better than random, we still have a proof of quantum advantage. The hope is that we'll be able to realize one of these cryptographic proofs of quantumness someday soon in an experiment. And then we'll really know where we are with quantum computing.
So that's a very short clip of a much longer process that we've certainly been going, in the middle of, that takes these complicated concepts and translate them through movement as well as music. There's other art forms, of course, that exist that really match beautifully with this space. And we started to hear a little bit from Nicole, but I'd love, Nicole, for you to speak a little bit more to the depth of what you've been doing in the steampunk world, which includes poetry, sculpture, and many other things.
So, as I mentioned, I feel that quantum thermodynamics, which is very closely related to quantum information science and very much overlapping, is the real-world version of steampunk. I discovered this in grad school, and I felt like I just couldn't help it. This is what I did, and so this is what I had to celebrate. So I started by writing about this connection in blog posts for Quantum Frontiers, the blog of Caltech's Institute for Quantum Information and Matter, where I still write. That led to a book that I published for the general public in 2022 called Quantum Steampunk, The Physics of Yesterday is Tomorrow. It's mostly a nonfiction book, but each chapter starts with a little snippet from an imaginary steampunk novel. And this proved useful because the characters in that imaginary steampunk novel could then help in the chapters as we try to understand quantum information processing protocols. So in quantum information science, for instance, in cryptography, we often think about an Alice who's trying to send a message to Bob, and Eve is eavesdropping. Those became characters from the Victorian era. So steampunk came to be a useful, playful scene where we could learn the quantum information processing contents. And the book contains some artwork that I think is really beautiful. It was created by the steampunk artist Todd Cahill. He had no experience with quantum physics, so creating these drawings was an experience. But I think he ended up with some really beautiful, old-fashioned draftsman-style drawings that actually illustrates quantum information processing protocols. That led to it's part of some visual art in which I've participated. I mentioned that the Quantum Startup Foundry has its booth in the other building, Capital One Hall, features a quantum steampunk sculpture. So I collaborated with a different steampunk artist on this. We were representing a quantum engine made from 1 qubit that manifests as a trapped ion. We incorporated a whole lot of elements of qubits, their geometric representation, and so on. Kind of complementarily related to the book that I mentioned, I co-teach a quantum steampunk creative writing course at the University of Maryland with a faculty member from the Jimenez Porter Writers House there. We have a wonderful spread of students from across English, physics, biology, computer science, and mathematics. These students learn about quantum information processing and thermodynamics. They read steampunk short stories and publish short stories about quantum technologies and quantum physics. They write their own quantum steampunk short stories, and they critique each other's writing. This course ran for the first time last spring. We're running it again next spring. So if anyone here is a University of Maryland student and you're interested, feel free to sign up in a few weeks. It was such a blast, and I think everyone from across the academic spectrum had a lot of fun and learned a whole lot of different skills.
Fantastic. So, Anjali, you just had a pretty extraordinary, expansive Q3 conference at the University of Maryland. So you had a chance to work with some artists alongside your fellow students. I'd love for you to talk about maybe the common ground that the arts can create in this space, and you've got, I think, some interesting perspective about finding common ground even amongst your colleagues in the STEM areas.
Yeah, so basically, people who are specializing in quantum also specialize in different subfields. So like, for example, someone who specializes in like quantum photonics doesn't really know much about quantum algorithms. And so when those two people talk to each other, they probably will not be able to understand each other and what they're doing. And so if two quantum people can't understand each other, then imagine the rest of the public. And so that kind of leaves everyone else out. And like a big factor of that is accessibility. And to put that into perspective, I'm actually curious on like how many people here would be able to afford the $1,800 fee to be here if their company didn't pay for it. Like how many people here would be able out of pocket to pay $1,800? No one, right? So your company made this conference more accessible to you by covering the fee. And so art makes quantum accessible. And what I mean by that is that not only is it affordable, as in you can use any medium of your choice, like it's free to dance, but then it also like is the way that humanity universally like communicates. And it also makes comprehension a lot easier. And so everyone wants to be the first to like build this quantum technology, and they're like, to build the quantum workforce, we need to like train all these people, but then how do you get people inspired to join the field in the first place? And so if you're trying to get people that are already not in the field, then art is the way to do it. And so not only does art actually like help educate the general public, but it also allows like people to like visualize what quantum is and how quantum will fit in their life and how it will impact the world.
Amazing. Wow. It's almost like you should be up here moderating the panel discussion. So wonderful. So you talked about translation, and Margaret, as a marketing person, there's probably a lot of educating that you have to do, and INQ is actually invested in some of this work at the University of Maryland. So some of the projects that are occurring right now are thanks to INQ's investment. From a marketing perspective, how is this a helpful way to approach the work that you do?
Well, first, thank you to, I feel like I'm with family, all of the University of Maryland folks. Because INQ was born and raised in Maryland, in College Park, Maryland. Our offices are actually on land that is the University of Maryland. But I guess I'd say my job, I spent 20 years at Microsoft and I've worked in compute. I was an intern at Intel, so all parts of compute are meaningful to me. And I didn't understand why people were so curious about the impact of quantum when I just thought it's compute. Of course it's going to have an impact. And then the second thing I was very surprised about was, hey, is quantum going to take over every kind of compute? There's no such other compute. And so I came up with an analogy, and I'm going to try it out on you because I've tried it out on 1,000 physicists, as well as 1,000 just people at Fast Company's stage in New York. And I learned that I needed analogies. I needed pictures, I needed words, I needed gesticulation, as I am as a marketer. But when people say, well, quantum's going to take over every kind of compute, and I say, okay, let's imagine, if you will, we go into your kitchen, and in your kitchen you have an oven, you have a stove, and you have a toaster. And then this magic thing comes into your kitchen called a microwave. What does a microwave do? I don't know how microwaves work, but there's something about a magnet, it excites molecules, but what does it do? The impact of microwave is to get something stone cold to burning hot in the fastest time possible. The combination of your oven and your stove and your toaster won't do it as fast. But does my microwave toast my bread every morning? No, it's terrible at browning. And because I cook a lot, when I make a steak, I start it on the stovetop and I finish it in the oven. It's a symbiotic relationship. We need everything. We need CPUs, GPUs, and QPUs. But when people hear that, they can understand that it's possible that a quantum computer could be in a data center. And you know why I also like the microwave analogy? There are more microwaves than households in America, which means right now there are actually more data centers and businesses than there are in the cloud. But something simple like an analogy helps at least break barriers between physicists and, I'm applied economics. But from an art perspective, one thing I've learned is for us at INQ, we've grown rapidly, doubling and doubling. Our company is now 1,000 people, and we keep doing these acquisitions, and I realize, what our quantum computers are named? Our first quantum computer is named Harmony. Our second quantum computer was named Aria. The third one's Forte. And the current one that we're selling, our 5th generation, is called Tempo. And as everyone asked me, is this music theme still important? And I said, yeah, actually it is about harmony. It is about like singing at the top of your lungs in an aria. It is about Forte. Forte is important. It is about loud. It is about being out there. And I realized that we do use music. I played music all the way till I was 18, so I like that. I didn't name the products, by the way, but it does actually create a bridge, because we didn't name our products IonQ 458 XXX BY3, which is actually what a lot of quantum companies do. And you should see that from us, we are trying to build that bridge from a name that means something, that means that there's a tempo, that means that there's a forte, that means that there's a loudness and a boldness to our computers. And then from an art perspective, the best webinars and things we've ever done at IonQ, the highest rated times we ever go out into the marketplace of physicists and business people are when we have the best art on our slides, when we have animations that show movement, when we try to explain photonic interconnects, or we try to explain space when we talk about sensors. It's always the images, it's always the movement that draw people in.
Amazing. And forte in Italian means strong, not just loud. So there's something amazing about that. And harmony doesn't exist without dissonance. So we have to have something that is tension, and then it gets resolved, and then you recognize it as harmony. And we expand how we describe harmony in music theory on a regular basis, because things become more harmonious the more you're exposed to additional sounds. So that's a great analogy. I feel like I need to learn from you. Thinking about how this all works from a translational standpoint, we also don't want to miss the fact that artists actually bring something to the table that is addressing something from a different perspective. And when we first showed part of this video at World Quantum Day at the University of Maryland, no fewer than 5 people who had been to many quantum gatherings that were from the legislative area came up to me and said, this is the first time I've actually understood anything that was being said. So I use that not to make a joke, but to say that it's really important that we also address how can we educate people in a space that is largely using vocabulary that may not resonate with the larger population. To that end, Adriane and Carl, when we workshopped the first iteration of what you saw, there were dancers that were observing that had no idea what quantum was. Can you describe what kind of happened in that transformation? John Sawyer and I were sitting there, and what I noticed was people that had no starting point or any vocabulary to do with quantum, 10 minutes after a conversation were using words that they had never spoken before in a context that made sense. Can you describe that briefly?
I mean, I'm thinking about the dancers who saw it, but I'm more thinking about myself. I had an idea of what Carl was talking about. And I think that process of me and Jonathan trying to understand, and Carl's patience, Carl's supreme patience in continually trying to help us connect to, it's not even understand, but connect to the concepts, I think led to us putting something out that was, I don't know, pushing out to them something that meant something to us, and therefore they actually, because I hope they like me also, that they're my students, so I think they naturally sort of are trying to figure out what I'm trying to say to them. And that's the language that they understand. So if you have we set early on, this is measurement, like this is discrete, versus blur, set the vocabulary, and then you take the vocabulary from there. Do you want to say anything, Carl?
Yeah, sure. Just wanted to comment on, so, we use the word understand a lot, and I think what I've gained from this partly is an expansive view of what it means to understand, because what we're aiming for, I think, is to give people the ability to interpret and to critically evaluate what they see about quantum. And I think quantum has a reputation for being really difficult, but I think it doesn't deserve quite that reputation, because if our goal is to critically evaluate and to be able to feel the concepts, I think there are fast routes to that. And I did get the sense that we found those when we were working together, because if you take something, even if it is totally new, which in a sense quantum is, if you can see it and you can hear it and you can also manipulate it, then it would say that you understand it. And that is, that's enough to be able to work with it. It's enough to be able to do this kind of interdisciplinary work that we had fun with. And so I think that's kind of what I hear when I hear about the experience of people watching the audience, that we're able to do that.
I think I'll just say also with dance in particular, I know there's music as well, maestro here, shout out to you. But I think there's something in that kinesthetic exchange, the mirror neurons of the audience as they watch the dancer. It enlivens their own bodies and provides a connectivity. So I think there's something about how music, how dance, how art connects to something that is more primal, possibly less cerebral, and therefore is able to sort of like make that impact and then usher in this capacity to search deeper.
Great. So lightning round as we end the day and you head off to your reception. We'll start with Nicole. I'd love to hear your 30-second answer of what is next for you to explore, and what are you most excited about in exploring that when it comes to the quantum and arts space?
I should probably mention I've had a request. So some readers of my book have requested a quantum steampunk novel as a follow-up. So if anyone knows an editor interested, then let me know. The sculpture that we built, that I built with a steampunk artist, is about 8 inches in diameter. We would love to make the full-scale version. He tends to make artwork that's about 8 feet in diameter, as opposed to about a foot. So if anyone is, say, building a new building for a quantum team and they need artwork to liven up the space, then feel free to get in touch with me.
I hadn't thought as much about this as I should have, and now I'm getting very excited to talk to you afterwards, because you were right about the visceral reaction to music or dance. And in fact, in all corporate America, they use television commercials with music and movement for a reason, because it makes somebody think differently. But I will ask, when somebody says, what you can't see quantum, or I don't understand the zeros and ones, because isn't the world absolute? And so this is the analogy I use, but I would love to see it enlivened in either art or music or somehow, is if you get a quarter, it's heads or tails, right? And everyone goes, well, I know what a quarter looks like. It's zeros and ones. And I said, okay, well, what if you get a quarter, and I do it, and spin it? Is it 0 or 1? Is it heads or tails right now? And they're like, I don't know, it's kind of both. And then I said, is it north, south, east, or west? And I'm like, I don't know, it's kind of everything. And I said, you physically see the power of quantum. You have a coin, it's possible that there can be all directions at once. An answer that you didn't think of, it's not 0 or 1s, but thinking in that way and maybe enlivening that with music or with dance, I would love to challenge myself to figure out a way to bring that kind of thought to life. Like I didn't know, and now I do.
So before I tell you guys what I'm gonna do next, I'm gonna tell you guys what you guys are gonna do next. And so since we're all qubits in a quantum computer, we should all be like Carl. We should all be patient, and we should all start learning how to communicate with the general public, and do that in a creative way, not just using your words, but by using pictures and whatever your heart desires. What I'm gonna do with the Cubed initiative is I'm gonna continue to build an open source repository of quantum educational material, and I'm going to start embedding science communication within the next cohort of interns that the Center for Quantum Networks has.
I think I'm excited for whatever our conversation is going to be after this, Margaret. But also the next event that we have, which is live dancers and video, performance that we're going to be doing on October 30th for the President's fundraiser. I'm very excited to dive into that.
So in addition to further iterations of this, I would say just in general, I think in this dimension, I would like to continue, we're thinking like artists here. So the question is first, what story do we want to tell? And secondly, what is the vocabulary that we're using to tell it? And especially the experimentation, the kind of experimentation that Adriane and I did at the beginning, I would love to do more of that. We find the overlap. We say, well, this is how I would express it. And the person from the other side finds a way of expressing the same thing. And then there's the connection. So finding more of that.
Fantastic. Thank you all for being here. We're happy to answer some questions, absolutely, especially if you can hold off on a drink. So, yeah, okay.
Thank you. Excellent presentation. So when I see the top thing that says accessibility, I don't really see much accessibility. How's a blind, deaf, quadriplegic, intellectual disability? How do you handle those kind of people?
So I'm going to pipe in on that. So this is one sort of small example of many things that we're doing, and you raise an excellent point. The things that the arts have been doing for a long time is thinking holistically about what are the sensory experiences. So we have a quantum orchestra. We have a quantum poetry project. We have a number of different things that are not currently being illustrated, but when we think about accessibility, yes, we need to see it through that lens, as well as all the ways that we're talking about as well. So yes, we're taking a holistic view towards that. Thank you.
I would also just add, so there's this principle that I was introduced to a long time ago when I was in graduate school that we called effective redundancy, which is that we are communicating through multiple channels at the same time. The speaker who introduced me to that, he was talking about the visual and the words, the auditory. But I'd say we want to use effective redundancy across all the range. So whatever angle people can come from, whatever they are most adapted to, we would like to resonate with them on that.
And there's a question back here.
This last speaker has been really impactful for me, and it alone has impacted how I should approach people of different backgrounds in the future. So I can say arts and quantum, they might not go along, but this thing perfectly illustrates how arts can go with quantum, especially with dance. So it is true that people have to communicate it in different styles, but why is it seen as particularly challenging to communicate ideas to different audiences, even in the same company, and even in different departments of the same quantum, quantum chemistry against quantum algorithms? Why is it so difficult to communicate? As if they're in different cultures.
So I think one of the easiest way to explain this is, let's say you have a language barrier. How would you explain your work to someone that doesn't speak the same language as you? Because so my parents speak English, and I'm also a daughter of 2 immigrants. They speak English well, but they don't know anything about quantum. And so me trying to explain how quantum photonics work and what I'm doing with super resolution imaging, it will just completely go over their heads, me verbally just talking about it. And so what usually helps is me drawing pictures or me showing them animations that I've made to help. And also, let's say my example with quantum photonics and quantum algorithms, right? So someone who's doing quantum algorithms, let's say if they're using Qiskit, if they're familiar with using Qiskit, right? They are quantum teleportation to them looks different than if you actually do it with a laser. And those are completely two different things, even though they're the same thing. Like, someone who is in quantum photonics would not be able to look at an IBM circuit and be like, oh, that's quantum teleportation.
Thank you. And time just for one last question here. Yeah.
How can we actually have these concepts weave into for all the middle schoolers and high schoolers, as they actually, a lot of people are interested in plays and, a lot of cultural activities. How can I think at some point we need to phase out all those Disney stories that that goes on repeat, and introduce this so kids are introduced to these cutting-edge technology sooner than later. I think now it's high time. And is there something that you have already thought about? I would love to know, or if not, can you expedite that? Yes.
Who wants to take this here? I mean, what I'll say is on behalf of the University of Maryland, I think those are all the spaces we're in right now. I mean, we have a college of education. We have disciplines that are committed to how does this work mean something to them. And our university has made a commitment to quantum. And when President Pine stands up, as he did earlier today, and talk about quantum for all, I represent an initiative that is arts for all. And so John Sawyer and I work together on a regular basis to think, okay, what are all the spaces that we could ensure that our entire campus community, which is vast, is activated? And we have to start with what we have on campus. There are so many people that don't necessarily know what this is, and then we can start to scale it out as you're suggesting, and as we have thought about. And so even as Anjali is thinking about as a future person outside the academy, how can she educate people? We're probably going to be relying on people that are her age and younger to help us understand what's going to resonate. So Disney got it right. So what can we learn from them in that way? And so I think there's some excitement actually surrounding all of that. So that's a logical next step, and I think there are many conversations occurring, certainly at the University of Maryland and hopefully elsewhere as well. Okay, I know that it's time to wrap up, so thank you all for staying with us, and I encourage you to continue to interact with the panelists. Thank you.